My name is Lori Thompson, and I am the director of the Capital STEM Alliance over here at ESD 113. And I'm so excited to be partnering on our third venture into this lovely summit with the Timberland Regional Library. And I'm going to introduce Cheryl Haywood, the CEO of Timberland, in just a second. But I'd also like to mention that the Capital STEM Alliance has been around for about 6 years, and we focus on birth through age 30 and anything having to do with career pathways, STEM education, equity issues, supports for students, youth, families, and children, young children. And we love getting involved in all of our regional work across the 5 counties. And at this point, I'm really excited to introduce Cheryl Haywood, the CEO of Timberland Regional Library, who's going to be our co-host today.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori, and welcome everyone. It is very exciting. This is the third Moving Forward Together event for our 5 county region. I will do what Lori just did and introduce Timberland Regional Library. We've been around since 1968, voted by the people for the people to create a public library district in Thurston, Lewis, Mason, Pacific, and Grays Harbor County. We serve about 550,000 people now, and that keeps on growing. We have 260 staff who are awesome, and we have 29 libraries across the 5 county region. So today we're focusing on childcare and childcare issues. And so I'm gonna introduce, do you want me to introduce Gary, Lori?
Yes, but before we do that, I'd like to acknowledge and thank Chris Charzan from Timberland Regional Library for being our tech support today. Chris is the Public Services Administrative Coordinator for Timberland Regional Library, and we are so grateful to have him here supporting this event. Thank you, Chris.
Yes, he rocks. He definitely
Yes, he does.
rocks. Yes.
Okay, now you can go ahead, Cheryl.
Okay, so I would like to introduce to everyone Gary Burris. He is the Executive Director of the Childcare Action Council, and he will be giving the keynote talk right now. Take it away, Gary.
Thanks, Cheryl. Hey, everybody. If you stop sharing your screen, I can start sharing mine. Thank you. All right, is that showing up for everybody?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, so I'm Gary Burris, and I'm, as was mentioned, with the Childcare Action Council. Let me put this into, hopefully I can put this into slideshow mode from here. Let's see. Screen sharing is crazy. It seems like it disables things sometimes. There we go. All right, so I'm going to start by telling you just a little bit about the Childcare Action Council. Is someone able to monitor the chat for me? So if a question comes up, you can just jump in and let me know. Cheryl, great. I see you nodding. So just if something comes in the chat, just let me know. And if anybody has a question, just feel free, if you want to, just unmute and ask at this time, or you can put it in chat and we'll do it in between slides and Cheryl will let me know. But let me start by telling you a little bit about who we are. So we've been around since 1987. We do work with 6 counties. We work from Thurston and Grays Harbor all the way up the Olympic Peninsula. And our mission is to promote and nurture early learning communities where children and families thrive. We offer several types of programs. We have programming for the childcare workforce. So we support childcare providers by doing on-site supports for those providers, help them with continuous quality improvement efforts. And then we also offer professional development for the childcare workforce throughout the 6 counties. And then we have 2 of the state preschool programs. That's called ECAP. And those are in the North Thurston School District at Pleasant Glade Elementary and in Shelton. And then we have a series of family services programs. So we operate Dolly Parton's Imagination Library in Thurston and Mason counties. That's free books for kids from birth through their 5th birthday. We have play groups that are in Grays Harbor, Thurston, and Mason counties. We have something called Safe Kids just in Thurston County. So it's focused on preventing unintentional injuries through water safety, bike safety, including the Great Olympia Bike Rodeo, and then having car seat checks, and then we go to other events and share information. We pass out bike helmets, a lot of different things to keep kids safe. We have a program called Margie's Crisis Nursery, and I'll talk a little bit more about Crisis Relief Nursery work near the end of the presentation. We have something called Blockfest, which helps young kids learn about early math concepts through block play, helps build those connections so that they're preparing them for math in school. And then Parents as Teachers is a program that helps kids and their families, and that's just in Shelton. It's basically a home visiting program for families. So I'm going to share with you a lot about the childcare industry, starting off with childcare as a business. It's a really low profit business. And often I think of it like the restaurant industry, where you see restaurants come and then they go, because it's really hard to make a go of it in the childcare industry. So we've seen a lot of and the pandemic, I'll get into that in a minute, but that just made things really, really tough for the childcare industry. And then there's a lot of regulations, and the regulations are there for a good reason. We're trying to keep kids safe. And so childcare ratios, for example, are one of the areas where we're having lower ratios for younger kids versus older children. They get a little higher, but it helps keep kids safe and getting the supports that they need. Also a lot of regulations around the facility itself, whether it's a home or a center, and regulations around the staff, background checks, certain kinds of vaccinations, certain kinds of training that's required. But with all of those costs, then there's not a lot of money to pay staff. So staff salaries are usually pretty low, unfortunately. And that generates some issues that we'll talk about in just a minute. And then, as I mentioned, there's different ratios. So the ratio for preschoolers is 10-1. So often you'll see a class of 20 or 18 with 2 teachers. And with toddlers, it's 7-1. And with infants, it's 4-1. And the recommended ratios are even lower than that. So I think it's like 8-1, 6-1, and 3-1 as ideal. And so preschool often in a child care center subsidizes basically infant care, because even though infant care maybe costs, 30-40% more than preschool care, having 10-1 versus 4-1 more than makes up for the higher costs that the infants are able to be, that they're able to charge for infants. So that's the business itself. Oh, hang on, I did not forward. What's going on? Oh, there we go. So going back to the years, knowing the pandemic isn't over, but the worst of the pandemic hopefully is over. So those first couple of years, we saw a number of sites close. Everyone closed immediately, at least for a few days. Some opened it back up pretty quickly. Some never opened back up. Everyone had to innovate to stay open. So that meant things like having one room in your home, maybe if you had a family home, that you did for your preschoolers. And maybe you had one room, maybe you brought in some school-age kids because schools were closed. So you had maybe a first grade room in one of your bedrooms. So they innovated to keep kids isolated and safe. We had a lot of folks who had jobs that they had to go to in person. So we think of essential workers, but that's just not just healthcare and fire and police. It's anybody that has to go to work, grocery store workers, others who have to go to their jobs. So they really came through for all of us by being open and helping those folks be able to get to work. And also, I think local employers and local government really stepped up and made some of the COVID relief funds available through the governments. And then local employers tried to adjust schedules, flex time, do other kinds of things to make it possible for workers to get their work done, but also balance their families' needs when their kids couldn't be going to school. And one last piece here, and this isn't necessarily attached to the pandemic, but it was just at that time, in 2001, the legislature passed Fair Start for Kids. So that really expanded some of the child care subsidies, and we'll talk more about that in just a minute. Let me see if I can figure out how to move my bar of people here, because I can't see my whole screen. And I can't find my cursor. This is fun. Okay, let's see. Let me hit escape for a sec. You all are down at the bottom of my screen. It's cutting off my my screen itself. Okay, go back to the presentation here. Okay. So the pandemic caused a lot of stress for families. Families, adults, kids, all were stressed. Some of what we saw during that 2-year period were reading scores for kids going down. Um, uh, or not reading scores, but reading activity with children was going down for that 2-year period. So there's some research that had been done looking at home learning, and one of the areas of concern was that there was less reading in the homes. Parents were trying to manage kids in their whole school activity. So where, as it used to be, the kids would come home maybe after school or in the evening, parents would read to the kids. Now they're trying to make sure they got all their schoolwork done during the day, and so they didn't have that same level of parent engagement that they would typically have had after the school day. And then children who were born during this time, what we're seeing now is a lot of the 3 and 4-year-olds, their developmental level is not as progressed as you would have typically have expected prior to the pandemic. So there's some efforts to support kids in getting to the correct developmental levels. An example would be that you might expect 2-year-olds to do what's called parallel play, which is where they might be near each other and playing, but not really interacting with each other. And we're seeing that now with 3 and 4-year-olds. So kids are just a little bit behind in their development. So I'm sure the schools are going to be having to support children and their families with that as well. So challenges in the industry, I mentioned a few of these up front, but I'll go into some more detail now. So we're going to talk about affordability, access to childcare in the workforce. As far as affordability, the Fair Start for Kids Act that I mentioned a few minutes ago is a significant investment in supporting access to childcare. So it did a couple of things. So it expanded who's eligible for a childcare subsidy. And a couple of years ago, the first increase was bringing the eligibility up to 65% of median income, and now it's at 85% of median income. And what that means is if you had 100 people working in your community, the median is going to be your person at spot 50. So it's not a mean, it's not an average of everybody put together and divided by the total number of people. It's that middle point of earning. And that's really a better way to think about supporting families, because sometimes you might have a handful of multi-million-dollar salary earners that would skew your mean high. So this helps you figure out where half your families are, or 85% of that first 50% are, right? And so that income level then for eligibility is up to $7,000 a month. Now, that's not a full subsidy. You're having a pretty high payment from the family at that point, but it's a small subsidy. And as your income is lower, than the amount the state supports you with as a voucher to access licensed childcare is higher. But what we've seen, though, unfortunately, is, for families, is that the cost of childcare has risen quite a lot in the last 4 years. So we went from, these are the dollar amounts for Thurston County. We're looking at family childcare here. So this is a licensed home that offers childcare. And you can see that the different ages of children, so infants, toddlers, preschool, and then school age. What looks like it's out of whack here is a school age change, but basically what had happened here was in 2019, you had a lot of a higher percentage of the kids at school age were in childcare for a full day. So schools were closed. Family childcare might be charging $800 or $900 for that school age kid to come there all day. And now we're back to the normal where the school age kids are at before school and after school care. So the cost is much lower, right? So that last bar chart at the end is a little bit misleading. Where there's a gap in affordability is as you get to that 85th percent of median. So from there, which is like the 43rd percentile or something like that, through on up, families aren't able to access subsidies. So that's your sort of like your middle income families aren't accessing subsidies. So the availability is there for the low lower income to sort of the moderate level of middle income at the, so the threshold of middle income, and then for families that earn enough to privately pay for their entire cost. That's who's able to afford childcare. And then the center costs have also gone up. On the numbers didn't show up on here, sorry. So I don't know if that's large enough on all of your screens, but for infant care, it's like it's probably around $1,050 a month. Now it's closer to $1,350 a month, and similar gaps of a couple $100 increase for toddler preschool care. And again, school age is that anomaly there. Why don't I stop for a second in case anybody has a question, and maybe I'm using some language that if anybody has any language you'd like me to clarify, and I see something in the chat, so I'll check that out.
Do you want me to read the question?
No, I see it. Thanks.
Okay.
So, yeah, so accepting a subsidy is not required. And I'll get to the subsidy rates in a minute, but the legislature has raised the subsidy rates significantly. And due to that, a lot of providers do take childcare subsidies. I think it's around 2/3 or 70% that accept subsidies right now. Any other questions? Just jump in if you have one.
That's a good question.
Okay, I'll go on, but again, just stop me. I don't know if anybody new has joined, but please just stop me if you have a question. There we go. Okay, and so the next issue is around access. Even like I mentioned before, even though the cost is higher for infant care and toddler care than preschool care, there's more profit to be made in the preschool area. And there's a whole lot more regulations around infant care. One of the positives in our state is the family medical leave that's provided now for families when they have a child. So people can have paid time off, but it's not a full year. And so there's always going to be a gap somewhere, even if both parents take family medical leave. And infant care is just very costly, and a lot of regulations around that, and a lot of concerns around safety. So there's just less and less of it being offered, but you can see the costs here. So as I mentioned, the use of the median is used a lot in the childcare world. So this happens to be the median median cost that's being charged. So in a family childcare home, the median cost is $1,100, whereas the 75th percentile is $1,280. So subsidy is getting really close to that median. And in fact, I think I made a mistake. So I think it was the subsidy was $1,288. I think I just had a typo there. So it was just ever so slightly higher. And the same with the childcare centers, in that the 75th percentile. And what that means is, out of 100 people charging who have a licensed childcare spot for an infant, and that's the rate that 75 out of 100 providers charge $1,630 or less, and then 25% charge $1,630 or more. So they're paying a rate now at $1,668, which is probably around the 80 or 85th percentile, which means it would pay the full cost that somebody is charging up to that level. And the nice thing about the way they've set it up now is that if let's say you're in a community that doesn't have as much wealth, so maybe you're in Rochester, let's say, and maybe you're only able to charge $1,200 in your center for a cost for an infant, but your costs are still high. Your costs are maybe like $1,500, $1,600. So they've now made the subsidy rate available to everybody, regardless of what you charge your families who are paying with their own funds, because they recognize that families paying with their own funds can't actually pay the cost that it costs the facility to offer this care. And that's particularly true, again, around infant and toddler care. And the other thing that we've seen is a drop in businesses, and this did not come out right. I was trying to fix this towards the end, so that should be 2019 and 2023. So 2019 was 204 licensed childcare businesses in Thurston County, and in 2023 there are 157. And that's had an impact on the number of spaces available. So we went from We went from 7,441 spaces in 2019 to 7,078 spaces available today. And part of that is, I think this is an apples to apples comparison, but I'm not absolutely certain. And here's why. If you look at these numbers in the summer, they go up quite high. And so I was looking at a report that came out in, I think it was July or August of 2023, and the number was over 8,000. And so I checked in with the people that put the data together. They're part of my state Childcare of Washington, and they're like, "Oh, we think that was a summer bump." So what happened is you have all these school age programs that offer summer camps and things, and those kids become a lot of them get into a licensed care situation. So the numbers are inflated in the summer. So I think these are at pretty close to the same time of year from 1919 and 2023. So there was in fact a drop. And now I'll talk about some of the workforce issues. So the huge issue is compensation. So both pay and benefits. The wages have always been lower, and with the pandemic again, some businesses like maybe fast food maybe increased their pay $1 to above minimum wage, whereas perhaps a childcare owner had to stay at minimum wage, and minimum wage has increased over the last several years. So those were significant costs to their operations, going from, I don't even know where we were, but $10 or $11 to $15 is a big increase for a business that's really just barely making ends meet. But then they're also competing against others that are at the lower end of the lower of the pay scale. So that creates problems there. And the other issue is that maybe you do have employees, and maybe they even just love their jobs, but they have families, or just even if they're on their own, trying to make ends meet. And so there's high turnover. Oftentimes what we find is that people who are able to stay in the industry a long time have a spouse that is working as well. So there's a 2-income household, and then they can have somebody afford to work in childcare. But it's very difficult to, as an individual, as a single parent, it's crazy difficult to make ends meet and stay in the childcare industry. But at the same time, having caregiving by trained staff who are compassionate and empathetic and work well with kids is hugely important to kids' development. So we really want to try to get the right people in the positions and help support them get training. And there's a lot of efforts to get that training at low or no cost, scholarships and those sorts of things. But even so, there is high turnover. So now we can talk about some solutions. One would be, if we're able to get increased government revenue, we could do two things. And we will be seeing in the 2025 legislature the first efforts to pursue in a significant way this concept, which is, the two ways are: one, reducing the cost to families by providing additional subsidy, and the other is increasing the compensation for the workforce in some significant level. So I always like to talk about early learning, for me, being similar to higher education or even K-12 education. As a state, the Constitution of Washington requires that we fully pay K-12 education, the #1 priority of the state. And so it's 100%, at least supposed to be 100% cost covering of the K-12 system. And we also then in higher ed cover 25, 35%. It's gone down since when I was in college, unfortunately, but still a pretty significant investment in higher education. And I think that there's a really super strong case to be made that early education is a key to kids' success and to their success in school, to their success in economic life, and getting jobs and staying out of trouble, all those things. So which makes it a public good for having all those good things that society benefits from. So for the state to think about a way to fund early education similar to college, where we're doing maybe 25 to 50% of the cost as opposed to 100% of the cost that we do in K-12 education. Another way we can support businesses, and this is something that my organization and others like mine, there's 6 regional entities across the state that are providing services similar to mine. We don't have a lot of funds to this part of the work, and we're always trying to get additional dollars, but it's to help businesses in their business operations to be more successful. So that can be providing tools like templates for parent handbooks. It can be helping them find accounting software that's inexpensive to meet their needs of their small business. We offer courses for people that own or that are the directors at childcare centers. One of the biggest things we heard from them is, staff morale, staff cohesion, supporting their staff. So we've offered leadership and other kinds of programs for the directors. We have directors cohorts, which are opportunities. So for example, in Bremerton a couple of years ago, we had 10 or 12 childcare. We did these in the Thurston County too, but we have providers that come together as a cohort, meet maybe every once a month for 6 to 8 months, basically develop a support system for each other, to learn from each other, to share ideas, to share struggles. And then often those individuals keep those relationships and connections, and they can help each other out in their businesses. We also think about employer support. So my organization worked with the Thurston County Economic Development Council as a grantee for this. And then we basically carried out the grant, was to figure out what was needed in childcare for the both for the workers, as well as so the workers who are needing to get childcare, as well as the workers who are the people in the industry providing childcare. So we're trying to figure out from both sides what is needed, what do employers need, what do their workers need. There's some ideas came out of that we were able to share to support those employers that were interested in things like flexible work schedules, flexible spending accounts. So for example, perhaps an employer now offers health and dental and vision and retirement, and they're giving out 30% of the basically on average of each person's salary and benefits. Well, they can then instead say, we're going to make that same 30% amount available, but here's a plan, a set of options for you to be able to choose. And maybe part of your choices is a childcare choice. So you can put maybe a little bit less towards healthcare, a little bit less towards retirement, a little bit more towards childcare while you're needing that. And it gives them the flexibility to have that as an employee benefit.
Gary.
Mental health is a
Hey, Gary, there's a question from Izzy LeMay. The question is, are you seeing any policy proposals to increase paid maternity or family leave? That seems like one solution to the higher costs of infant care. Yeah,
that is absolutely a really great strategy. I don't know what is in the works right now. I used to work for a policy think tank called the Economic Opportunity Institute. They're out of Seattle, and they really pushed the paid family leave first in Seattle, and then in a few other cities in the state, and then worked with the legislature to get that passed. So if you were interested in learning more about what might be going on with that, I would suggest checking out Economic Opportunity Institute. It's EOI, and I'm guessing they would have either a policy paper or a page on their website dedicated to that very issue of paid family and medical leave. But I haven't heard of anything recently, but if anybody's working on it, it would be them. So one of the things that I mentioned, with the pandemic, but this has been, I think, going on for a number of years. And frankly, I think my personal opinion is we spend too much time as adults on our cell phones when we're around kids, parents and others, and or watching television or other kinds of distractions, as opposed to the time that kids need to interact with caring adults. But we've seen additional increase in social emotional issues for young kids. So one of the things that we do in our region, and this is also across the state, is we have mental health consultants who work with the childcare centers and homes who've identified a child with some behavioral issues. And our consultants go in and try to support the people working in the classroom or in the home with the kids to get new strategies that they can use to help those kids in better behavior management. And then a related, it's just a different name, but there's also infant toddler consultation, which is basically very similar. It's just a different funding stream and supports. So. A lot of kids are in licensed childcare, but then there are a lot of kids that aren't. And most of those children, a lot of them, well, not most, but a lot of them are cared for by their parents. And then we have what we call the family, friend, and neighbor care. It's an informal system. So it might be a family member, it could be an older sibling, aunt, uncle, whoever tied to the family, cousins, some connection, or it could be a neighbor, it could be a friend of the family that's watching the kids. So we at Childcare Action Council offer programs for family, friend, and neighbor caregivers. We have weekly play groups called Kaleidoscope Play and Learn. And it gives a chance for the parents to come together with their kids, and also or caregivers to come together with their kids. The kids play, the parents can have some adult time socializing, and then the play group facilitator can see if there's anything like developmental delays or other needs for services they can direct parents and caregivers to. And then this, I just added this today. Shelly Willis, who's on the line with me, and I applied for a grant from the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. So one of the needs we have in our community, and Shelly, I would welcome you to chime in on this, is for families who have a situation where they're in need for some either temporary respite care, or some situation has come up where they might need maybe the family has had encountered some sort of a crisis where they might need short-term care for a week or two or so. So this grant we have is just started this month, and it goes for a year, and it's going to do three things. We'll be looking at the needs of the community, the families and the kids. And we have connected with the Nisqually tribe, as well as an organization that serves Latinx families in Thurston and Mason counties, to do some cultural specific work in looking at their communities. And then we'll also be then doing some broad looking at families throughout the county to identify what the needs are. And then we will look also at what assets are currently in our communities to support families that have a crisis situation or a need of some respite care, and finally develop some potential solutions and models for support for that. Do you want to add anything to that, Shelly?
Looks like she's good.
I'm
Okay.
good. Thank you, Gary. Well said.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so in summary, there's a huge need for care. I didn't mention this, I should have, but you saw where the numbers of slots have dropped. Most facilities are full. If they have an opening, it fills up very quickly. There's a lot of folks who want to access childcare and just can't find space. And that's more true at the infant and toddler level, but even preschool, there's often wait lists and difficulty finding spaces. As I mentioned, my personal philosophy is that education is a public K-12, just like a K-12 education, childcare is a public good. So would like us to fund childcare at a level that supports more families being able to access childcare, which if we had more money in the system, we'd have more slots available, more families being able to access childcare. The state really has made a huge commitment, and the amount of funding going to child care and early learning has increased dramatically, but we're talking, and I don't know the exact percentages, but we went from maybe 1% of the state budget to 1.5% of the state budget, whereas K-12 education's about 50% of the state budget. So even though that was a multi-million-dollar, hundreds of millions of dollar increase, we're talking about tens of thousands of kids. It's not as much as is needed, right? It's significant, it's important, but it's just not as much as is needed. So there's that piece of it. And then finally that the family friend and neighbor network is one of the largest ways we care for our kids and one of the least financially resourced. So additional supports for that is needed as well. And with that, I'll stop sharing and see if anybody has any questions.
And if you think of a question after this, please feel free to reach out. You can reach Cheryl or myself or Gary just through email. Many of you already know us, and we're happy to share our contact information with you as well. Gary, thank you so much for bringing up these multiple topics and issues around childcare access and affordability. They're all so important, and we're grateful that you were able to actually bring those up in front of all of us and help us move them forward throughout the year. And we are going to be talking a little bit more about some of these issues today in our panel discussion. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists, and with much appreciation to Gary for a wonderful keynote. And Gary, could you also make your slides available to us at some point? Just send us, provide the link to Chris and he can get that out to us. Because I know I'd like to see that.
Yeah, I'm happy to do
Being
that.
a visual learner.
And I don't know that I thanked everybody who put this on. So thank you for the Capital STEM Alliance and the Timberland Regional Library for sponsoring this. And thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We're really privileged to have you here. Appreciate it. Okay. At this time, I'd like to remind our panelists, we have about 5 to 8 minutes per person for a brief overview, and then we'll start some questions and maybe get into a good discussion. And if we have time, we can take questions from our participants in our audience. So it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists. First, I'd like to introduce Melody Furs at ESD 113. Melody is the Early Learning Education Specialist and Child Find Coordinator at ESD 113 Education Service District.
I'm sorry to cut you off. It's actually North Thurston Public Schools.
I'm so sorry. I made a mistake. North
Thurston.
Thurston Public Schools. Oh my goodness, I'll have to change that on my agenda. Sorry about that.
I didn't know it's either. So
Thank you for correcting me. I appreciate
I
it.
say that. I just didn't know.
Okay. Okay, I'm at ESD 113. I just made that assumption. I apologize.
I wish we worked together.
And then we're so lucky also to have both Mary Rulowitz, who is the manager of the Timberland Regional Library Service Center, and Shelly Willis, and Cheryl Haywood, who is the CEO of the Timberland Regional Library.
Hey, Lori, Mary Rulowitz. Mary, can you share your title, please?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
I apologize again.
No worries, no worries. So I'm the early learning coordinator. for
Early learning
the
coordinator.
Library, yeah. And
Okay.
Cheryl is our executive director.
This is what happens when I go on vacation for 3 days. Okay. So Mary and Shelly are a team, and they're going to be talking about childcare issues and resources and for early educators and families from the Timberland Library. And finally, I know I got this right. Shelly Willis is the Executive Director of Family Education and Support Services, or FES. So we're very lucky to have all 4 of you. And I would love to kick us off and get us started. I'm going to start with Melody. Melody, could you tell us what are some of the issues around offering childcare to young children with special needs? I know this is a big topic for a lot of families, and it can also be an issue for childcare providers who need the special training. So go ahead and just whatever information you can provide.
Sure. Thank you so much. And again, thanks for everyone for being here and for sponsoring this chat. I think this is really important information for folks to know. So I really appreciate the organizations involved. And Gary's great explanation of things, which I don't know a lot of those things. So I was really happy to be there and learn that. So, students, early childhood populations with disability obviously are a very wide spectrum of learners. And we know, based on years of research, that the earlier the better, the earlier the intervention, the better are the outcomes, right? And some of the challenges that we face now, of course, are you know, they sort of mirror, I think, the challenges at large, right? So funding, resources, obviously. For young children too, there's a lot of challenge around early identification. So, right, yeah, shout out early intervention. So, you know, we sometimes have cases, like I said, I'm our child finder coordinator. So, you know, we're legally mandated. It's a federal mandate that you basically find children with disability. And so, you know, we have screenings, and this is my first year in this role, so I'm still kind of a newbie to it. But I got to say that I'm kind of blown away. So during our child find, like our last child find, couple of child finds, you know, we have all of these 5-year-olds. So they're going to be registered for kindergarten, and just now they're kind of getting to us and being like, oh, we need to, you know, they need to be screened and have an evaluation. And it's like, oh goodness, you know, we could have already been kind of working with you to be able to kind of provide early intervention services. And it's not across the board that they haven't had anything. I mean, some of them have had ABA therapy or, you know, outside therapeutic services and things like that. But that early identification piece is really a challenge. And to be frank, I think communicating better and providing more resources to pediatricians and medical professionals, early childhood medical professionals, would be one of the things that we might target, because I've been working in early childhood for about 15 years. And I can't tell you, and my specific expertise is blindness and visual impairment. And I can't tell you how many moms I've met, you know, whose kids eventually got services that said, oh, the doctor said, don't worry about it. But you know what? I knew that there was something wrong. And so that's a really common theme. And I think just continue, and we are trying to do a better job in that space to, you know, help pediatric ophthalmologists and optometrists understand things. But I think just across the board, those general practitioners, you know, who are pediatricians, and really getting the word out to them. And I'm not quite sure exactly how to tap into that population, but I know that my director has had some conversations with local, you know, pediatrics offices. Because a lot of times, you know, I think parents kind of hear, oh, you know, they're going to be okay. Let's just kind of wait it out. And in some cases, that might be the case. You kind of wait for that development. But I think it's so complicated now with the fact that, you know, like Gary shared with us, that we just have these kids that are just like, there's gaps, like they're behind. And that's kind of across the board. And so, you know, does that kind of become the norm? Do we kind of change our standards? You know, that's kind of something I think that remains to be seen in terms of the way we evaluate and assess these children. But currently, you know, in North Thurston Public Schools, in our early childhood special education preschool programs, we are really busting at the seams. We have a lot of students with a lot of different needs. And we also have a lot of students transitioning in from age of 3 that have maybe had services from an early interventionist. They've been identified, and now they're going to come in, and we know that they need services. But then we also have this whole group of kids that, you know, we don't know about, right? So how are we catching them, and how are we kind of getting the word out? So I think that identification and connecting families with services, which has probably always been the challenge, is still a challenge. And you know, I don't like to blame COVID for everything, but I think there were already kind of these barriers, right? And this has brought them to the surface perhaps faster than they would have come without it. So that's certainly an issue. And the other side of the coin is kind of like early childhood providers, of course, who are not special educators, and the staff and resources they have to be able to do the work. Because frankly, a lot of times children get kicked out of daycares. The daycare can't deal with the behaviors, they don't have the staffing, but they also just don't have the experience to be able to. And so we really need to kind of look toward those inclusionary frameworks. And I think, to be honest, policy. You know, and not necessarily your in-home daycare, you know, your folks who are kind of, you know, I know it's very costly, and there's a lot of resources behind running your own in-home daycare, but those more commercial daycares, I think we need to do a better job of aligning with them to kind of work on policy and practice, because I have students in my program who were kicked out of 4 different preschools, 4 different daycares. And so how do you build connections with a child when they just keep getting shifted from place to place to place? And also the stresses of the family of like not having childcare. And then finally they get to this place where it's like, oh, my child has to be kind of identified with a need and a disability in order to for them to have childcare, right? And we also, I'll just finish up one last thing. The other challenge is that, we have typically developing peers. And so that really allows us to provide, typical peers with children with disabilities so that we can have more inclusive and less restrictive settings. But it's a hard sell sometimes for those parents of typical peers because, well, we are working on our kind of funding system to make it a little bit more affordable, but we only offer the classes 2.5 hours a day. So if it's that versus, going to an all-day daycare, right, which is what I needed for my child when he was in daycare, I needed to drop him off at 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and I need to pick him up at 5:30. So that also just doesn't, it's not advantageous for parents to be like, oh, this seems like a great idea. Now there are some, we do have typical peers, but we don't have as many as we would like to have. And so anyway, so I think those are, hopefully I was not too concise probably, but just to try to lay out kind of some of the things that we see as challenges in our area. But of course, I think it's probably across the board what people are experiencing.
Thank you, Melody. Does anyone have any questions for Melody about, I have a lot of questions, but I want the audience to go first. Anyone have any questions? I actually have a question. I know how difficult it is as a parent of a child with special needs to advocate for your child at the school setting. How do parents advocate? How do they educate themselves around their child's special needs, especially at such a young age, to be advocates for them in a daycare or child caring setting?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I kind of know how it works, in our system where we very much, we try to collaborate with families. We have a series called Success in the Early Years. And actually I'll share that with you all to kind of disseminate too. And that's one of those things where it's like before COVID, it was like gangbusters. It was going really well. People were coming. And then we kind of moved to virtual and we've lost some of the I think just momentum that we have. So we're trying to build that back up again. And actually we've been working with the ECAP and Head Start folks and a couple of other folks as this kind of inclusion team, which I'm really excited about. But the idea might be to have like viewing parties at like one of those sites so that families can come and just see it and be online and be together and, maybe like share some tips, but also kind of get this information. But anyway, so that's one of the ways in that we try to kind of include families. And we actually have that across the grade span. That's early learning all the way up to secondary. But, so at our level, we collaborate with families. Obviously, we have a natural ability to when we have IEP meetings, when we have parent-teacher conferences. I don't know, for my son's daycare, they would check in with me once or twice a year. They would have me fill out, like a kind of a form with questions. There were connections there. When you have a child with disabilities, how do you sort of get into that system and help them to help your child, right? That's really the question. And I think that's really difficult. And I think that's why we have these situations where kids are just like kicked out of the daycare, right? And I talk to, parents, and sometimes that's not always the case. It really just depends on like the capacity of the program, and it depends on kind of the kid and like the issues that they're having, right? But I think that families are basically just told like, he can't stay here. And then they'll go and try another daycare and the same thing happens. So how do you kind of like stop that cycle, right? And I also think just like educating, families about sort of the rights of folks with disabilities. To me, it's an access issue. And can you put some kind of a demand on the system so that they do have more inclusive practices, so that their policies are not so exclusionary, right? Because maybe there's some kind of funding and resources if you accept students with disabilities. It depends, obviously, private versus, for profit and all that kind of stuff, and nonprofit. But so I think parents have to really be on top of things. I actually just had a transition IEP meeting with a family this morning with a boy with some needs for sure. And he did have birth to 3 services, but he was in daycare. He was in daycare for like a year, and that seems to go fine. And his mom actually was like just telling us about like all the things that she does at home to sort of like meet his needs. And I was like, do you want a job? Because like you're doing it all, right? And so that too is super important, because if we can also communicate the tools that we're using in special ed, and we do have students that are in daycare and our program, absolutely. And how can we make a connection there and say, oh, well, this is what we do in preschool. You know, these are the visual supports that we use. This is what we do for so-and-so to make sure that they can have a calm down space to be able to kind of regulate their emotions. So also communicating across the team that the kind of supports that that you're using and how they're effective strategies with that student, right? Because people don't know what they don't know also. So I think helping the families to understand what works, and then the family being able to share that information with the daycare team can be a really good thing.
I do appreciate that you said an access issue, and it's also an equity issue under IDEA. So yeah, and parents do have a lot of rights that they may not know about. So educating yourself is always so important. Cheryl,
Yeah.
did you have any questions from the chat?
There's a comment from Alexis, and she writes, well, first of all, thank you for sharing insight about early intervention and inclusive practices. And then she writes, parents should try to connect to a birth through 3 ESIT or ESIT family resource coordinator to access advocacy support and deeper connections to services. And Alexis, who works for Timberland Regional Library, serves as the Pacific County support person, I suppose, in this role.
Oh. I used to work for Timberland, Cheryl. It was a wonderful experience. I now work for the state of Washington doing early support services for infants and toddlers. But it was a wonderful experience, and I'm so glad to be in the same space with you tonight.
Awesome.
Well, absolutely. And that system is just so robust, and it really meets families' needs. I was the kind of division person for all of Pierce County when I first moved here. So I did early intervention for a number of all the agencies up there. And I know that's such a nice way to get in. And I think that's one of the issues, is that there are some children that just don't receive those services, right? And then they don't have anything kind of until they get to kindergarten, right? So what happens with them, and how can we help them out?
All right. If you have any other questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. Thank you so much. And if we have time, we'll come back to Melody with more questions. And I'd like to now turn it over to Mary and Cheryl from Timberland Library to talk about some of their early education resources and also childcare resources for families, communities, anyone who's working, anyone who knows how to read.
And before Mary starts, I just want to say that Shelly started it. She said library cards open doors to the world. So
right.
Thank you, Shelly.
Good tee off, Shelly.
Yes, excellent. Go ahead, Mary.
Well, thank you. I'm like you, Alexis, I'm really honored to be here with a group of people who are so committed to young children and families in need. And you know, I've been around Shelly. I've heard a lot of what you do. Gary too, I know he had to leave, but really amazing work everybody does. And so we at Timberland are also really committed to birth to 5. We have a strategic focus right now, which it's never going to go away. I mean, it was supposed to go to 2024. It's ongoing. We offer early learning programs year round in all of our branches. So just putting that out there. Yes, we're very, very aware and very much appreciate the value of quality early learning experiences and resources. So again, to kind of echo what Gary said, you know, addressing the social and emotional needs of children is so important. And we have a role, you know, when I think of these superheroes over here, like Shelly and Melody and Carrie, we want to be there to support you all and the families that you serve. So how do we do that? So I thought I would share my screen and just, I don't want to talk too long because Shelly, I know you have a lot, but I want to just make people aware of some of the resources that we offer. So, go here. And Cheryl, please go ahead and chirp in when you can. I know you'll have a lot to share. So as Shelly said, library cards really do open the world. And our library cards are free, of course, and they give you access to all of our, of course, our books, our collection, and online resources. I'm going to focus though right now, if you go to trl.org and then right here, you can go to Birth to 5. And I just want to show you a few of our resources on this webpage. So we truly, truly believe that engaging with your young child with books and talking, having interactions like writing, singing, playing is definitely building a foundation for them when they start school. We call it early literacy or pre-literacy. So you can access all of our early literacy our story times and early learning programs on this events calendar. It's really great because we have 29 branches and all branches offer play groups and story times. And you can go to the events page and limit by location and age group and find an early learning program in your community. Of course, we have books, and on this page you can check out new picture books, new board books, and parenting books. Some of these resources people are not aware of, and they're really awesome. I'll talk really quickly. You can check out these things called launch pads, and it's kind of like an iPad, but they're loaded with early learning apps. They're specific to age groups. So if you have a toddler and you're trying to teach numbers or letters, you can check out one of these. It does not need internet access. And most of them, they should be charged, but they do come with charging cords. And you can check out specific launch pads for the age and the topic. And then we have Vox books, as we strongly believe reading to your child is one of the most important things. And it's lovely and enjoyable, but not everybody has time to sit and read with their child. And so we have these wonderful things called Vox books, where they are pre-loaded with a recorder. Just push a button and the book is read, is narrated. So these are wonderful. We have in collaboration with Capital STEM Alliance, we have provided early math backpacks that are loaded with, there's a launch pad in them. There's sort of an early math game, manipulatives, and of course books on different themes like counting and shapes and money. There's even one for money math. So these are available through our catalog. You can check one out. And then we also have, for kids who love to listen to books, we have what are called playaways. And so they come with a headset and they're loaded with a story. And so kids can listen to those. So our picture books are pretty awesome these days. We've changed the way we organize them. So if a childcare provider comes in and they want to feature a specific theme, our books are organized. I think there are 14 categories. So if you're doing a theme on families or things that go or imagination or whatever, bedtime, animals, you can easily browse our picture book collection and find books in those themes. let's see, we have blogs that kind of address sort of current and topical issues. You can get a list of all of our story times in our 5 counties. If you read this blog, there's also our summer library program is happening right now. So we encourage kids to come down, families to come down. It's for birth all the way up through adulthood can join the summer library program. We're giving away a free book just for signing up, and you get a free book when you finish. Okay, Cheryl, now it's time. Oh, let's talk about what we offer outside of our branches. So as I said, we have 29 branches. We are a rural library district. We have communities that aren't very close to some of our rural branches. So we now have a mobile library services. We call it Anywhere Library. And these vans, which are pretty beautiful, they go to all of there's 1 van per county. Childcare providers can arrange by using this request form to have us come out and offer story times, take and make activity kits, grab bags. So if teachers are doing a specific theme, we can select books and deliver them to you. There's Wi-Fi access, remote printing. They can sign up for library cards remotely. So all kinds of wonderful services. Another service.
Can I just jump in for a minute,
Mhm,
Mary?
mhm.
Around Anywhere Library. So as Mary mentioned, it's we have 1 Anywhere Library specialist with 1 van per county. The goal is to reach 15 to 31 sites per month per county, making it 160 sites per month. The full list of where the Anywhere Library specialists go is on our website. They're going to churches and food banks and community centers and senior centers, etc. What you will not see on the website is that they are going to Head Starts and ECAPs and schools. Because those are closed to the general public, but we are doing that. And so if you want the latest list, we can provide that to you. So I
Also, Cheryl,
yes.
also to tribal early learning centers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We're going to tribal early learning centers too.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, I kind of launched into all of our resources. I do want to mention that, you know, just connecting, how can we support childcare providers? And, you know, our goal really first and foremost is to provide quality early learning programs and resources. And our staff, all of our staff who offer early learning programs are trained. They're experts in the field. They have a passion for serving families, particularly families in need. So we just, you know, we worked with Gary for the Friends Family Neighbors Network. And he sort of, you know, they brought those communities into the library, made them aware of our resources and our services. And that's been awesome. And now we kind of want to cast a broader net and help them find families in our rural counties so that we have you know, kind of spread the wealth of early learning programming throughout our district. So what else, Cheryl? Oh, the Connect boxes. So another really awesome service for childcare providers is something we called Connect boxes. So Youth Connect boxes are boxes of books. We have about 24, they're filled with 25 to 40 books. They can check it out for 8 weeks. No fines or fees. So that's a really important thing. I want to talk about that with our any of our books for young children. There are no overdue fines for any of our books, but particularly those, if they come in damaged, you won't get charged for that. And so anyway, the Youth Connect boxes, childcare providers can check these out. They can order them just for very early readers, but we also have boxes that have books for middle readers and teen readers, and also bilingual books in Spanish and English. So there is a request form that you can find on this page, and I should show you how to find this. let me go here. So from the main website here, if you go to services, you'll find the connect boxes here.
Can
So-
I just jump in, Mary, and add that we have 11 libraries right now, and more will be added in the future. 11 libraries right now where we offer expanded access hours. And that means that the library is available for parents and young and you know, birth to 5 children to go into the library from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily, including Sundays and holidays. People love that service. These are typically smaller rural libraries where they had about 30 hours of staff time, and they still continue to have some, you know, some staff time. And so we've been able to go from approximately 30 hours a week to 91 hours a week in all of these libraries. And so all you need to do is go to a local library, request that you get an expanded access hours key fob or a key card, and that will allow you into all 11 libraries. And they're all the same, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. daily. And so if you have children who are 14 years of age and above, they can get their own key card. For under 14, they come in with a parent. And people love it because they're able to get there in the early morning, evening, and Sundays. And so for a full list of these libraries, you would need to go to trl.org. And it's a very safe space.
That's right. Yeah, not to mention you get free printouts. So providers
free scanning, free scanning, free faxing, $44 of free printing per month per library card.
Yeah. So does anybody have any questions? You know, one other important thing, I think Gary touched on this, and maybe Melody did too. You know, we do, of course, a lot of outreach, and we're very committed to providing services to people outside of our branches. But, you know, these our programs, especially for early young families, really provide an opportunity for that social connection that was so sorely it disappeared during COVID. And I've talked to so many families who feel so grateful that they're either new to town or they're overwhelmed by being at home with their children, and they can come to the library and be with other people. Their kids can have that opportunity for social emotional learning, being around other caring adults. So I just also want to promote that libraries as important networking, meeting places, social centers. Okay, well, thank you all.
Thank you, Mary. Cheryl, did you want to add anything?
No, Mary did a great job.
All right. You have a lot of supporters. Everyone is being so supportive in the chat about Timberland Library. And speaking strictly for myself, I say you are the #1 resource and probably the only resource you need to get started. So many things that I didn't know about that Timberland offers. So we love Timberland Regional Library.
And with this new website that we have now, it's so much easier for people to find things.
Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you both. And our listeners, if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat. And now I'm going to turn to Shelly, who will talk to us about childcare access, affordability, and family-friendly employers. And this is all Shelly's experiences. She is an amazing resource as far as early education, childcare, you name it. I partner with her on a grant, and she is the best partner in the world. So go ahead, Shelly.
Thank you, Dr. Lori. Boy, I'm going to make an appointment with you every week. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. As a nonprofit agency serving over 20,000 individuals annually, we too identify childcare and access to childcare as a barrier at the forefront for families, including our own workforce. My entry into the workforce was as a childcare provider. I was hired at an entry-level position and placed with a group of toddlers and I was told to get them changed and ready for nap. I had never worked with kids before. This was my first experience, and I put on my best teacher voice and asked them politely to get on the mat. And nobody listened to me, and I was gobsmacked. I didn't know what to do, and I failed. And they sent in a floater to help me, and she walks in, and she took command of the room, and she said, "Everybody on the mats before the spiders get you." The kids are jumping on a mat. I'm jumping on a mat. I'm not sure where the spiders are coming from, but we're all safe. And I realized this is a ploy to get them on the mats. And we're sitting here and we're patting their backs to go to sleep. And I learned my first lesson in early childhood, which is early learning is powerful, and that words are powerful, and that adults surrounding children have the ability to influence their future. Those children later roll into our future workforce, and they form the next generation of parents. Investing in healthy early learning is important for all of us to consider. It impacts us all. While the regulations, the mandatory training, the child ratio limits are essential to sustain safe and nurturing environments, they're also expensive. And a recent report from the Department of Commerce noted that the cost of infant childcare is more than in-state college tuition. Across 34 states, not just here, but across 34 states, it's more expensive to be in childcare than to send a kid to college. That's astounding to me. It is my belief that no one enters the industry of childcare because they want to get rich. Somebody forgot to tell them something. The childcare providers I've met are noble, dedicated individuals who are trying desperately to develop and sustain a career in the field, but they are finding it nearly impossible to stay when the same level of education will afford them increased salaries and benefits across a different career path. Also important is a parent's ability to access and afford and sustain their own childcare. I can't tell you the number of women who've come to me and they've told me they've had to drop out of the workforce or switch to a part-time job solely because they couldn't access affordable childcare, safe, affordable childcare. And I'm also aware of the families who've had to decline work or a salary increase because it put at risk their subsidized childcare. Clearly, a dramatic investment in systemic change for childcare is needed. Gary spoke about some of the progress that's already happening across the state. Gary gave us hope about some of this work that has launched, but there's more work to be done. I appreciate the STEM Alliance and the Timberland Library and Childcare Aware for their leadership on this issue. I thank you all for coming because we need you. We need this voice. We need to amplify the need and advocate for systemic change. Thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Lori.
So powerful, so powerful. Thank you for saying those things, Shelly. I know childcare, the childcare deserts that we've learned about in our partnership, and it just breaks your heart. And it affects the workforce. It affects our regional economic forecast for the future. If parents can't afford to put their child in a safe childcare place and afford it, then workers are leaving their employers and employers are losing great employees. And it impacts everyone, not just families, not just employers. It impacts everyone. And as Gary had said, and you had said, having quality childcare, and especially for our students with special needs, as Melody said, without all those resources available, we're not raising the best adults that we can. It does take a village. It's a collective effort. And I am so glad that you were able to tell us this so eloquently, because having all of those things in place is so overlooked and doesn't need to be. And this is going to tee me up. I'm going to tee this up for our next steps, which are policy and advocacy. Everyone here is a stalwart supporter of family-friendly workplaces and good childcare, affordable access to childcare that is equitable and provides opportunities for all. So I think our next steps, and feel free to jump in here if you want. I'm on my soapbox now, but if anyone wants to jump in with questions, just go ahead. I will stop. But our next steps are to hold a legislative breakfast, which the Capital STEM Alliance does every October, for our elected officials to come and hear about our concerns and on the topics that are important to us in our community. And this year's topic, I can't think of anything more important than quality childcare and access to family-friendly workplaces, as well as providing early learning resources like the Timberland Library does. It's so important for our elected officials to hear from you, from our community-based organizations, from our employers, from our families, from our communities, from our providers, how important this issue is and how much we need to do something at the state level, not only with subsidies and pay and throwing money at it, but we need to change policies and make, like someone said, making maternity leave, paid maternity leave important and sustainable, because this is the kind of thing that honors the family and honors the workforce. And I can't say enough about how grateful I am to all of you for being here to support this and support all of these issues. Would anyone like to chime in? Or, I mean, I know I'm on my soapbox, so I can stop anytime, but we are going to hold the legislative breakfast this year. It's going to be held October 17th at Centralia College. And there's a pre-registration form going out this summer so that you can sign up if you're interested. It's going to be in person. It's from 8:30 a.m. to 11, and breakfast will be served. It's a catered event, and we're going to invite our legislators to hear what you, the community, has to say about these issues. We'll also have several presenters and speakers and a panel discussion, and there will be plenty of time for networking as well. So we really would love to have your participation in this. It's very important that your voice be heard by our elected officials. Would anyone else like to add anything? Okay. Cheryl, was there anything in the chat that I missed?
Alexis Hood will be attending your breakfast in the fall.
Okay. We are working on that. We have a planning committee that's meeting Monday to discuss this, and we've already got the things in the works, and we've already got several elected officials who are going to champion this. But we would love to have your input. If you'd like to be part of the committee, just let us know. Also, I'm going to tee up our next moving forward together. And Cheryl, I'm going to let you talk about that one, because this will be our fourth moving forward together in the fall.
Yes. And we're not quite sure. We don't have quite the date yet, probably sometime in
November. Yeah, I think.
November.
Yeah.
And so there are organizations right now who want to address the epidemic of loneliness and that came out of the pandemic. And so there will most likely be initiatives, at least in Thurston County for sure, but we would like to bring it to the awareness of the whole region. And so more to come on that topic.
Okay, thank you. I would like to thank all of our presenters today, and who did such an amazing job and spoke so eloquently about childcare, early learning, family-friendly workplaces, special needs, and just all of us out there who have children or who know children or who support children. It is so important, and it really does take a village. And I really appreciate your being here, all of you. And I would also like to thank Chris again for managing the tech support. And we are going to we have recorded this meeting, and we will make everything available to you. So Gary's slides, we'll send those to you. I'll send out an email to all of those who registered. If you had your email information in there, then you will get the follow-up information.
We also keep it.
Yes, go ahead.
Well,
go ahead,
we also put this recording on the Timberland Regional Library's YouTube channel. So
the ESD 113 YouTube channel.
And ESD 113. And so we have all the previous recordings of the first and the second moving forward together as well.
And the purpose for those recordings is so that you can access them It's not just a one and done. This is going to be a series, and it's like a resource library, an open resource library, open source. So I know Shelly has a place to go, and I want to thank again everyone for participating today. Thank you for being here, and we will see you at our next Moving Forward Together and our next legislative breakfast. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.